Hi, so this is a tutorial about unwrapping and texturing in Blender 2.76. And first I'm just gonna change the clipping so it's a little less messy. All right, awesome. So what I've basically got here is an aqueduct kind of a bridge that I made for a level. And basically what I'm gonna show you is how to go through the unwrapping process. So by default, the hotkeys you need for unwrapping to make all the different islands for a UV set, because that's basically what unwrapping is flattening a 3D shape into a bunch of 2D shapes so that you can assign a texture to it. So by default, the hotkey that you need for this isn't in. So I'll show you where the button is, and you can either use that button or use the hotkey that I'm going to show you. So in the side tab, which you can bring up by hitting T, and then in this UV tab, you can use the mark and clear seam buttons here. And you can see that adds or removes a red line. And these red lines are sort of like the cutting points for making these different islands. So for me, I like it a little bit faster. So I added my own hotkey system, which you can check out in this video here. And basically what this hotkey does is I added Control E and Control Option E or Alt E to add and remove seams. And if you want to do this manually instead of adopting my entire hotkey set, you can just go into 3D view, and then I think it's in mesh. Oops. Yeah, in mesh at the very bottom, you can just hit add new, and then you would want to type in these bits to get a hotkey for unwrapping. Awesome. And so you can see, I'll turn on the hotkey display. So you can see if I hit Control E, it'll add a seam, and Control Option E, it'll remove it. And you can tell when the red lines are there. Great. So I'm just going to go back a little bit towards how I got all these seams set up. And this is just the very end of me building the bridge structure. I was making a pretty simple structure for a phone game, so not too much resolution or polygons here. And you'll basically see what I'm doing, which I'm not necessarily covering this tutorial too much, but what I'm doing is I'm using an array so that I can make UVs for the whole object for just a section, and then it'll be duplicated automatically across a long section. So all I'm doing is setting up this one piece and making sure that there's no holes or like edges coming out that that you would be able to see like a hole through. All right. And then the way that arrays work is basically it duplicates the whole length of an object. So once I separated the top part out, it automatically held onto the same array modifier. And you'll also notice that I'm also on a mirror modifier. So I'm really only doing half of one section, and that section is duplicated a bunch of times. And then I also do like deleting the faces in between, so I don't have all that wasted. But one way you could do is leave those faces so that when you unwrap, it would be there, and then you could just delete all the ones you don't need after you apply the modifier later. So getting into the actual unwrapping, basically what I'm trying to do here is figure out where all the corners are, basically, and mark those with seams. And what that does is it makes a separate UV island. And you essentially want to add UV islands anytime where you feel like the shape might be warped. Think of it just looking at the 3D shape from one angle and just flattening it. And if there was any overlapping or any stretching, then that would be bad because it would distort your texture, or in some cases give you a lot of errors. And you'll notice that the way that I approached this model was just clipping a few different shapes together, and sometimes that's a good way to keep your polygon count really low. In most applications for games, it's probably not going to make that big a difference, but for phone games, it can be good depending on what engine you're using. to keep the count low. And you'll also notice that I'm holding down Option while I'm right clicking. And what that allows me to do is select a whole edge loop before I hit Control E, and that can be a really, really fast way to mark your seams. One thing to keep in mind with Blender marking seams is the seams stay as long as you want, which is awesome because if you make a change to your model later on and you want to unwrap it again, it'll hold on to all that really necessary seam information. So basically, anytime I make any small adjustment, that could make the texture map warped. And if you have ever worked with UVs, you know what I'm talking about. You know, making changes afterwards can be a really huge pain. But with Blender, you get these islands that are set up with seams. So even if you make changes, you can just re-unwrap and it'll fix itself. And yeah, once again, I'm just kind of removing the faces that are going to be linking these on the array, so I don't get any faces inside the columns. And once again, you could leave those in there and then delete those afterwards. Keep in mind that one problem with adding a lot of seams is that you don't correct for it later. You can get a slightly visible line in the final product. And there's ways you can fix that by sort of bleeding out the edge through a Blender operation. But overall, you want to put creases places that aren't in the middle of a flat surface, because then you don't want a huge sort of line cutting through a flat surface. And once again, you can see how I've set up the seams and I'm making all these changes so I can unwrap it afterwards, and I won't be punished for it. All right. Looks like I have the UVs I want, and you can test whether the UVs you made are good or not by unwrapping and looking at the seams. So we're gonna go ahead and get rid of these bottom pieces and test out and see whether this is a good job of marking the seams. And you can see my two modifiers here. Just gonna bring in a UV window. And when I hit the U button to unwrap, it shows me what I've got. And it overall is looking pretty good. Oh, except I've got a little overlapping here. Let's see. And if I hit this button, it'll let whatever I select in here will be selected there. So I can see what's going on here. Okay, so it turned out that I had a face on the bottom, which was connecting two different islands. Okay, so now if I re-unwrap it, it looks like that problem's solved. I can uncheck that so I can just select things freely. Yeah, it looks great. So now I want to fit the top section into there. All right, I'm just gonna quickly get these polygons a little bit lower res, and just because I'm duplicating this a bunch of times with an array, it makes sense to keep it as low poly as possible. I'm cutting up a lot of the quads into triangles just because when you're working with a game engine, a lot of times the game engine will cut everything into triangles anyways, and if I'm done with modeling it, I like to kind of choose so that the game engine doesn't cut a bad triangle. All right, so I just need to re-unwrap, and then I can apply the array and put it in there. And what you see, why it's so kind of opaque looking, is because it's the same UV overlapped a bunch of times for every time that the array has been duplicated. So I'm just going to go ahead and throw this into fit with the rest of the UV map with the main part of the aqueduct. So let's see if this was the best place to put it. Another thing I could have done is, before I applied the array, is separate the pieces so that I could, fit in the different pieces in different places. But I don't think I really have to worry here. It's a pretty tiny piece. All right. I think this is going to be ready for painting now. Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and create a new image. I'm going to call it Aqueduct. And then I tend to like to work from a kind of default tannish color. And I'm going to make a new folder to save it into, textures folder. And I'll save it there. And one thing that's really important to pay attention to is there's an asterisk symbol by the image button in the UV tab. And if the asterisk symbol is there, then it means your image is not saved. So you really have to pay attention to that. That'll tell you when you've made changes to the image and it's not saved. I'm going to go ahead and set up the material really fast so it'll work with the texture paint mode. I like a little bit of mid just so that there's no complete darkness. Helps me understand and paint better. I also like to turn down specularity because that can kind of be distracting from the colors too. Uh, and I'm going to go ahead and go into texture paint and try this out. A lot of times the thing I like to do first all right. So a lot of times what I like to do first when I start painting a model after I've got the material settings good to go, I like to pick a kind of a dark color. And just kind of paint in a lot of the cracks. And I also like to use really strong colors initially just to kind of get a sense of what I'm going to do. And this is just my personal painting preference. So feel free to ignore whatever you would do differently. But it gives me a good idea, also just what the form and the shape of the object is when I start painting. Because initially, when you have everything as one color, everything kind of blends in. So it helps me kind of spatially see it too. So yeah, I'm just kind of painting in a darker tone wherever the shadows are. And although it's true when you're working with games, a lot of the shading can be taken care of through lighting in the engine. I do think that there's a lot of strength to be gained from doing a lot of shading in just the diffuse, at least some. And I'm painting with an array on, so really nice thing since I'm doing a kind of a tiled texture you could think of because one edge ends up with the other. I should work in the middle of it because in the middle I'm painting from one end to the next end automatically. So and this is a common problem that you'd run into with mirrors, but not with an array because a mirror you're painting when you're painting in the middle of a mirror, you'd be painting on both sides and they'd be flipping towards each other. But with an array, you're painting on one side that connects to the opposite end, so it's not as big a problem. And once again, I'm pushing this towards a mobile game, so I, especially at this stage, I'm not overly concerned with getting an incredibly high quality or detailed paint job, just trying to do something quick so that I can run through the level and see how it feels. And as you can see, I'm kind of a fan of using pretty highly contrasted colors, but I am by no means an expert in painting. You'll also notice how I switch back and forth between textured mode and textured solid. And I have hotkeys for that, but by default, Blender has Option Z or Alt Z to toggle between solid and textured. And all the display settings you can set up in the N, if in the N tab. If you hit N and then go to display inside the sort of bar that pops up. And you can see how I switch back. Like right now I'm on textured solid where there's a sort of default base lighting from all angles, which can be helpful in making sure that you're not painting according to something. And there's also one more really important thing to keep in mind once you are done with painting or you're ready to take a break and you want to save your progress. There's this new glitch, and I'm not sure exactly what version. I think it might be 2.76, but it might have been one of the past couple .01. But anyways, sometimes it won't recognize that you've already saved the image, so you have to do a save as image again. And once again, the thing you want to look for is in the UV tab. If there's an asterisk by image, you see there's an asterisk right now. So that can either means that it's changed or it hasn't been saved. And I already saved it, but for some reason it doesn't recognize that, so I just saved it again. And if you see like reloading, it's not linking to the image that I just saved. And this is the glitch that I'm talking about. But that's why what you want to do is you want to go into your folder and check where your images are. And then what I just did is I saved out a second image because I was afraid this might happen. So I'm just gonna go ahead and delete that. And you see it's still not aware of that other image. Because it still thinks it's connected. It's a really weird glitch. But basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to Shift X so I unload that image, and I'm going to save it, and then I'm going to reopen it. And now it'll be completely unloaded. And now when I load back, I load that image back in, it'll be the correct one. So a weird glitch to watch out for. Basically, if you ever see an asterisk and it's not going away when you save it, just save as another image out. for now. Hopefully they get that fixed pretty soon. And that is a quick tutorial of unwrapping and texturing in Blender. I'm going to be coming out with a lot more videos soon about Blender versus Maya and a couple other really useful tricks that I've discovered in using Blender. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe.